Lena sat on the porch step, her little fingers clenched around the edge of her dress, her eyes locked on the rocking chair that no longer moved. Mama used to sit there. She'd hum songs while snapping green beans, her voice soft and tired, but always kind. Now, the chair was empty. Mama had died 3 days ago. The coughing had gotten worse. Lena had brought her water, blankets, even the little tin of salve the town doctor gave them once. But nothing helped. Mama's eyes closed one night, and they never opened again. The house felt wrong after that. Quiet, but not the good kind of quiet. It was heavy, thick with the sound of nothing and everything all at once. Papa didn't cry. Not once. He stood beside the bed that morning, arms crossed, face like stone. Lena had asked him if Mama was sleeping. He'd looked at her with empty eyes and said, "She ain't ever waking up again. Now get out of the way." From that day, everything changed. There were no more stories at bedtime. No more warm meals. Lena ate dry biscuits now, cold and cracked. She slept with her coat still on, even inside. The stove was never lit. Papa didn't speak much, unless it was to yell. He'd leave at sunrise, ride out to the fields, or disappear in a town. He came back smelling of smoke and liquor. He'd slam doors. He never looked her in the eye. One night, Lena gathered the courage to ask, "Can we say a prayer for Mama?" He spun around so fast the chair toppled over. His face was red, his voice full of fire. "You think praying helps? Your mama's dead. You should have gone with her." The words landed like stones. Lena didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just walked back to her room and curled up under the quilt her mama had sewn from old dresses. That night, the wind howled outside. The roof groaned, but it was nothing compared to the sound of silence inside. The next morning, she sat quietly in the corner as Papa argued with a neighbor on the porch. "I can't keep her," Papa said. "She's no good to me, always staring like a ghost. She's eating food I can't afford. I'll find someone to take her. Maybe the orphan wagon'll come through next week." The neighbor didn't say much, just gave a low grunt and walked off. Lena's heart thumped in her chest. She wasn't surprised. Not really. She felt it for days now. The way he looked at her, not like a daughter, but like a weight. Something he couldn't wait to be rid of. She didn't eat that night. She just sat on the floor in the hallway, listening to the clock tick and the fire crackle low. Her shoes were too small now. Her feet ached, but she didn't complain. When the cabin went still and Papa began to snore in his room, Lena stood up, grabbed her shawl, and crept outside. The barn was old, with slanted beams and a rusted hinge that squeaked when she pushed it open. She tiptoed inside, found a pile of hay in the far corner, and curled up like a kitten. The barn smelled of horses, dust, and Mama's soap, faint on the old saddle that had once been hers. Lena pulled the shawl around her and stared at the wooden ceiling. "I won't stay where I'm not wanted," she whispered. Her voice didn't shake. Not anymore. Sleep didn't come easy, but memories did. She remembered Mama talking about a brother once. Uncle Silas. He'd left home young, gone west, worked cattle, and broke horses. Mama said he lived high in the hills where the sky stretched forever and the land was wild and clean. She said he was quiet but kind, that he'd held Lena once when she was a baby and said, "She's got the heart of a fighter." Mama had kept a box under her bed, little things from her life before Papa. Lena remembered once peeking inside and seeing an old letter with faded ink. She hadn't known how to read all of it back then, but the name was clear. Silas Jameson, Dry Ridge County. If he was still there, maybe he'd take her in. That night, Lena made up her mind. The next morning, she returned to the house while Papa was still snoring. She walked softly, careful not to wake the floorboards. In Mama's room, under the bed, the box was still there. She pulled out the letter and folded it into her dress pocket. Then she packed the only thing she had, one change of clothes, her drawing of Mama, and a locket that held a photo of her as a baby. By noon, she walked down the dirt road, leading away from the farm. No one called after her. Her legs were tired, but she didn't stop. She passed 2 farms, waved at no one, and followed the fence lines until she reached the old Miller ranch. Mr. Miller had horses. Sometimes he delivered hay to town. She stood at the gate for a long time before calling out, "Mr. Miller?" The old man appeared, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked confused at first, then concerned. "Lena? What are you doing out here alone?" She swallowed hard. "I need to get to the post office in town. Can you take me?" He scratched his head. "Don't think your papa. He doesn't want me," she said quickly. "He said so. I just need to mail a letter." Mr. Miller looked at her for a long time, then nodded. "Ain't none of my business. Get in the cart." The ride was quiet. Lena stared at the fields and held the letter tight in her hands. At the post office, she stepped down, thanked Mr. Miller, and watched him leave. The clerk inside was young, with kind eyes. She handed him the letter and a few coins Mama had hidden in the sewing kit. "Can you mail this to Dry Ridge County?" He read the name and nodded. "Sure can, sweetheart. Want to put your name on the back?" She did. Just one word. Lena. For the next 6 days, Lena sat near the post office steps every morning. The clerk brought her leftover biscuits. She drank water from the pump out back. People stared. Some asked where her folks were. She just said, "I'm waiting for someone." On the 7th day, the mail coach rolled in. The clerk waved her over. "You got a reply, little lady." She opened it slowly. The writing was rough, but steady. "Wait outside the post office Friday morning. I'll be there. Silas." Lena read it 3 times. Then she folded it neatly, placed it in her pocket, and for the first time in weeks, smiled. That night, she slept inside the feed shed behind the general store. The owner didn't say anything, just left a blanket on a box near the door. Lena curled up tight, hand on her letter, eyes closed. The wind was still cold, but this time it didn't hurt so much. Lena hadn't been up in the attic since her mama died. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts. The wood creaked under her feet, and it smelled like mothballs and memories. She hadn't planned to come here. Her feet just brought her. Maybe they missed Mama too. She found herself in front of the big cedar trunk where Mama kept her special things. It was locked for most of Lena's life, but now the key was stuck inside. Papa hadn't touched anything of Mama's since the funeral. Lena kneeled and slowly lifted the lid. Inside were layers of soft cloth, Mama's Sunday shawl, a few quilt squares, and the white glove she only wore to church. Beneath those lay a stack of old letters tied with a ribbon. Lena's fingers trembled as she untied the knot. Most of the letters were from her Mama's sewing clients. Polite, kind words. But one envelope was different. Thick paper. Rough handwriting. It said Silas Wren, with an address and a place Lena had only heard of in bedtime stories. Uncle Silas. Mama used to speak of him when she tucked Lena in. "He's wild but good," she'd whisper, smoothing Lena's hair. "Rides the mountains and eats with the wind. But he's got a soft spot for horses and little girls." Mama would always laugh at that last part. Silas hadn't written in years. Not since Mama got sick, but Lena remembered every word. She stared at the letter now, heart pounding. Her hand closed around it like it might disappear. If anyone would take her, it'd be Uncle Silas. He might be rough and quiet, but he was blood, Mama's blood. That had to count for something. Back downstairs, Papa was asleep in his chair, the bottle next to him nearly empty. His snores were loud, harsh, nothing like Mama's soft humming. Lena didn't dare wake him. She tiptoed past, slipped the letter into her coat, and stepped outside into the cold morning air. Her boots were too small, pressing on her toes, but she walked anyway. She passed the barn, the old creek, the fence she used to swing on. The road stretched dusty and empty ahead. Her legs were sore by the time she reached Mr. Granger's ranch, but she stood tall. Mr. Granger opened the door, blinking in surprise. "Lena, what are you doing out here alone?" She didn't smile. Her voice was steady. "Can you take me into town?" He looked behind her, expecting to see Papa. "Where's your father?" "I need to send a letter," she said instead. Her face didn't change. Something in her voice stopped him from asking more. "All right, come on then," he muttered. The ride into town was bumpy, and the engine coughed like it had a cold. Mr. Granger tried talking. about the weather, about the cattle, but Lena stared out the window. Her fingers clenched the letter the whole time. When they reached the general store, she climbed out before the truck stopped rolling. "Thank you," she said, then walked up the steps alone. Mr. Granger waited a moment, then drove off. Maybe he knew she wasn't going back. Inside the store, the air smelled like flour and pickles. Behind the counter was a short woman with kind eyes and a blue bandana tied over silver hair. "Hello there," she said gently. "What can I do for you?" Lena placed the letter on the counter. "I need to send this." The woman blinked. "All right, let me take a look." She picked up the letter and turned it over. "To Silas Wren, out near Blue Range. You got a return address?" Lena gave her the old address scribbled on a paper from a trunk. The woman wrote it down neatly, then looked at Lena again. "That all?" Lena hesitated, then nodded. The storekeeper tilted her head. "You hungry?" Lena shrugged. Without asking again, the woman handed her a soft biscuit from behind the counter. "Eat. No charge." She took the letter and slid it into the outgoing bin behind her. "Mail goes out by noon." Lena took the biscuit and sat on a wooden bench near the window. Outside, folks came and went. A man loaded sacks of grain onto a wagon. A girl about Lena's age chased a chicken down the street, laughing. Lena didn't laugh. She chewed slowly and watched. That night, Lena found an alley behind the livery stable and slept curled beneath an old tarp. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried since Papa slammed the door and said, "If you had any sense, you'd run off too." Each morning, she returned to the store. The woman, Miss Agnes, she finally introduced herself, gave Lena a muffin or a cup of warm milk. She never asked why Lena was alone. She just smiled and said, "No mail yet, but you check again tomorrow." The days crawled by. On the sixth day, Lena came in and saw Miss Agnes smiling differently. Not the usual polite smile. This one had something behind it. "There's something for you today," she said, holding up a letter. Lena's heart slammed in her chest. Her hand shook as she reached for it. The envelope was plain, the handwriting stiff and large. She opened it carefully. Inside was one line. "Wait outside the post office Friday morning. I'll be there. Silas." Lena read it again and again. Her breath caught. It was real. He got her letter. He read it. He was coming. She clutched the note to her chest and sat down on the bench. The road outside looked different now, like it had a purpose. Friday was only 2 days away. For the first time since the sickness took Mama, Lena smiled. Friday morning came with fog in the air and cold in Lena's toes. She'd barely slept, tucked beneath crates behind the store, listening to every hoofbeat that passed. But now, she sat upright outside the post office, her letter folded and refolded in her pocket like a lucky charm. The street was quiet. Only a few wagons moved about. The baker's door opened with a clatter, sending a scent of bread through the air. But Lena didn't move. She kept her eyes on the road. And then she saw him, a tall man on a tall horse. His shoulders wide beneath a dust-covered duster coat. His hat low over his face. His boots were worn, one spur missing. The reins in his hands were old, the leather dark with use. But the man looked strong. Tired, yes, but strong. He stopped in front of the post office without a word. He looked down at Lena. His face was rough like weathered bark, but his eyes, they were soft, kind, blue like the early morning sky. They didn't search her, didn't judge. They just saw her. "You, Lena?" he asked. She nodded. "All right," he said simply, and held out his hand. She took it. His fingers were calloused, warm. He lifted her like she weighed nothing and placed her behind him on the saddle. She held on to the saddle horn, too shy to wrap her arms around him. He didn't push her, just clicked his tongue and nudged the horse forward. They rode out of town in silence. The land stretched wide and dry. Golden fields rolled on forever, dotted with mesquite and scrub. A hawk circled overhead. The wind tugged at her braid. Lena didn't speak, and Silas didn't seem to mind. He didn't ask her why she was alone or what her father had done. He didn't ask anything at all. The sun rose higher. They crossed a shallow creek. then followed a dirt trail through hills. Lena's legs ached, and her hands stung from holding on, but she didn't complain. She hadn't been this far from home in her whole life. Around midday, Silas pulled the horse to a stop beside a flat rock shaded by an old oak tree. He dismounted and reached into his saddlebag, pulling out a canteen and a biscuit. He handed her half. "Eat." Lena took it without a word. They sat side by side on the rock. Birds chirped in the distance. The horse drank from the stream nearby. "Your mama was my sister," Silas said finally, still staring ahead. "She wrote me when you were born. Said you had her nose." "You do." Lena looked down, unsure what to say. She was a good girl. Wild but good. Lena nodded slowly. He glanced at her. "You like horses?" She shrugged. "I don't know." "You'll learn," he said, and stood. They rode again. By the time they reached his ranch, the sun was low, casting long shadows across the ground. The place wasn't big. No grand porch or painted fence. Just a small wooden cabin tucked between two hills, a weathered barn, and a few fenced pastures. But it was peaceful. 3 wild horses ran along the edge of the field as they arrived. Manes flying, hooves kicking up dust. Lena's eyes widened. She'd never seen anything so free. Silas helped her down and led the horse to the barn. Lena followed slowly, her legs stiff. The barn smelled of hay, leather, and animals. It felt safe. He showed her where the tack was kept, where the feed sacks sat, how the horses were brushed down. "Tomorrow, I'll teach you the ropes," he said. Lena nodded. He didn't ask her if she'd ever mucked a stall or fed a colt. He just moved at his own pace, slow and steady, like the wind had taught him how to walk. Inside the house, the air was cool and quiet. Wooden floors creaked beneath her boots. A table sat in the middle of the room, a worn Bible on one end, a candle stub beside it. Silas motioned down the hallway. Second door on the right. Lena walked to it and pushed it open. The room smelled like lavender and old wood. A small bed sat against the wall, the quilt folded neat and square. A doll sat on the windowsill, faded but smiling. Dust sparkled in the air. No one had touched anything in a long time. "She was about your age," Silas said from behind her. "My girl. She passed some winters back." Lena turned. He didn't look sad, just hollow in the eyes, like someone who had made peace with pain. "I kept it the same. Didn't know why." He shrugged. "Maybe now I do." Lena stepped inside and laid her bag on the chair. It wasn't much, just her boots, the letter from him, and Mama's ribbon. But for the first time in weeks, she felt like she wasn't running. She turned back to face him. "Thank you." Silas didn't nod. He didn't say, "You're welcome." He just stood in the doorway a moment, then said, "You can stay, as long as you need." Then he walked away. Lena sat on the bed. The mattress was soft. The quilt smelled like sun and time. Outside, the horses snorted and the wind rattled the barn door. She curled up without changing clothes. Sleep came easy, and for the first time since her mama closed her eyes forever, Lena didn't dream of running. She dreamt of staying. The room was too quiet. Lena lay still under the quilt, staring at the wooden ceiling. It creaked when the wind blew outside. Somewhere in the walls, a mouse scratched. The night smelled of hay and wood smoke, but it wasn't the sounds that kept her awake. It was the emptiness. The bed felt too big, the pillow too soft, the silence too loud. She missed the weight of her mama's arm around her, the sound of her soft humming, even the tired sighs. That night, Lena dreamed of the cabin again, of Mama lying still under the quilt, of her eyes not opening, of Poppy yelling at the door, the baby crying, and the sound of hooves fading into the trees. She sat up with a gasp, heart racing. Her cheeks were wet with tears. "Mama," she whispered, clutching the edge of the blanket. "Mama, please." No one answered, but she wasn't alone. Outside her door, soft footsteps creaked once, then stopped. She held her breath. The floor groaned again. Then nothing. She waited. He didn't come in. He had heard her, but he didn't open the door, didn't knock. Just stood there for a while, then left. That morning, when she opened the door, something was waiting. A little wooden doll. Simple, unpainted, its arms and legs carved with care. Its smile was small but sure. Lena knelt down slowly. She picked it up and ran her thumb across the smooth face. She looked toward the hallway. No one was there. She didn't say anything, just placed the doll on the shelf by the window and got dressed. Out by the barn, the sky was pale blue and wide. The chickens squawked near the coop, pacing with little steps. Lena walked toward them. A feed sack was leaning against the fence. She tore it open and began scattering the grain. The chickens clucked and pecked around her feet. Silas was in the barn brushing down one of the horses. He glanced her way but didn't speak, just kept brushing. Lena finished with the feed and stepped into the barn quietly. The air was warm and thick with dust. She watched him a moment, then reached for another brush and started on the next horse. Her strokes were unsure at first, but the horse didn't flinch. "Name's Betsy," Silas said finally. Lena nodded, her fingers moving gently down the mare's side. "Hi, Betsy," she whispered. They worked in silence, side by side. Every day after that, Lena did a little more. She let the chickens out in the morning, helped carry hay, learned how to sweep the stalls without sneezing from all the dust. Silas never told her what to do. He just noticed and nodded when she tried. One afternoon, while the sun was high and Silas was fixing a loose hinge, Lena wandered to the back of the barn. A pile of old crates sat under a cloth. Curiosity tugged at her fingers. She pulled the cloth aside. Inside, she found a box full of odds and ends, old boots, a saddle with a broken strap, and under all, a sketchbook. The cover was worn and curled at the edges. She opened it slowly. The first page held a drawing of a horse, rough and messy, but full of motion. The next few showed barns, chickens, trees, and little wildflowers. One picture had a girl with a crooked braid riding a horse twice her size. Lena sat down on the crate. The drawings made her feel like she knew the girl, Silas's daughter. Her touch was still there, hiding in every line. At the back of the book, the pages were blank. Lena looked around. No one was watching. She pulled a bit of charcoal from the floor and started drawing. A chicken standing proud. A barn door swinging open. A tiny wooden doll smiling. Each night after that, Lena returned to the barn with a pocket full of scraps. She drew in secret. Her world, her fears, her memories. One page had her mama's eyes. Another had the trail leading to the ranch. She even drew Silas once from behind, fixing the fence as the wind blew his coat. She didn't think much of it. The pages filled fast. It helped her sleep. Then one morning, she left the sketchbook out on the workbench by mistake. She didn't notice until late that night, lying in bed. Her stomach sank. What if he thought she ruined it? What if he got mad? She rushed out barefoot, the air cold on her skin. The barn was dark, the lanterns out. She tiptoed in, searching for the book. It wasn't on the bench. She turned and stopped. Silas was sitting on a stool, the book in his lap. He looked at one page for a long time, then turned it carefully to the next. His hands were still. Lena froze. He didn't see her yet. When he finally looked up, his eyes found her in the dark. He didn't scold her, didn't ask questions. Instead, he held up the book and said, "You've got her lines." Lena swallowed. "I'm sorry. But he shook his head, closing the book gently. "You added to something that needed more." He stood, walked over, and handed it to her. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. It was small, just a pull at the corners of his mouth. But it was real, the first she'd seen. Lena hugged the book close and whispered, "Thank you." Silas tipped his hat and said, "Keep drawing." Then he walked out into the night. She sat in the barn a while longer, listening to the horses shift in their stalls, the wind tapping the wooden walls. Outside, the ranch was still, but inside her chest, something new was blooming. Not joy yet, not peace, but maybe the beginning of both. It was a hot morning when the knock came. Lena was sitting on the porch steps, peeling potatoes into a tin bowl. Her hands were dusty. The sleeves of her borrowed dress rolled up to the elbows. She looked up when she heard the knock, slow and firm. the kind that didn't go away unless someone answered it. Silas was inside, sharpening his knife at the table. He stood up and wiped his hands on his pants before walking to the door. Lena didn't move. Her belly tightened for some reason. She couldn't explain it, but something about that knock didn't feel like the others they'd heard. It wasn't the neighbor needing a rope. It wasn't the mailman bringing a parcel. This was heavier, slower, like trouble wearing boots. She watched from the corner of the porch as Silas opened the door. A man stood there, tall, stiff-backed, wearing a star-shaped badge on his chest. His hat was tipped low, and he had dust on his coat. "Morning," the man said. "Morning," Silas replied. "I'm Sheriff Matlock," the man said, voice low and even. "Looking for a girl. Lena Hayes. She's 10 years old, brown hair, light eyes. Missing for near 2 weeks. Her father's been asking all over town. You seen her?" Lena's heart dropped. She froze. Her fingers still gripped the half-peeled potato, but it slipped from her hand and rolled off the porch. She didn't hear it land. Silas didn't turn. He stood still in the doorway for a second, like he was weighing something in his head. Then he stepped outside, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. "Can't say I have," he said, steady and quiet. The sheriff nodded slowly. "Your name came up. Her mama was your sister, wasn't she?" Silas scratched his chin. "That right. She passed recently. Long illness. Hard times." Silas didn't say anything. The sheriff looked out past the porch, scanning the fields. His eyes landed on the barn, the hills, the broken fence Silas had been meaning to fix. Then his gaze slid back to the porch, to Lena, who hadn't moved. "You mind if I ask the girl her name?" the sheriff said, already taking a step. Silas put his hand up. "She don't talk much. Just a neighbor's niece. Folks out east." The sheriff's eyes narrowed just a little. "You sure?" Silas nodded. "I am." For a beat, neither man spoke. Lena stood up slowly and slipped inside the house. Her chest felt tight, and her hand was shaking. She moved through the quiet rooms like a whisper, then out the back door. She didn't run at first. She walked, slow and careful, past the chicken coop, through the tall grass behind the house, until she reached the barn. Once inside, she climbed, higher and higher, up the ladder and into the hayloft, then into the rafters above. She'd gone there once before, when a storm scared her. She tucked herself into the beams, pulling her legs close, heart racing. The sheriff and Silas were still outside. She couldn't hear them clearly anymore, just low voices drifting. But Lena didn't need words to understand. They were talking about her, about taking her back to that cold house, that cold voice. No mama, no bedtime stories, just silence and blame in those angry eyes. She pressed her face in her knees and tried not to cry, but the tears came anyway, hot and quick. She didn't know how long she stayed like that. Minutes, maybe more, but eventually she heard boots on the barn floor. Slow, familiar. Lena, Silas's voice, gentle and gravelly, floated up from below. She didn't answer. The footsteps moved closer. "It's all right, girl. He's gone." Still, she didn't speak. "I told him you got kin here, that you're staying, that I'd take care of you." Lena turned her face slightly, peeking through her arms. Silas stood at the base of a ladder, one hand on a wooden beam, looking up. He wasn't frowning, just waiting. After a moment, he climbed, slow and steady, the old ladder creaking with each step. He didn't come all the way up, just stopped halfway, so he could see her. "You don't have to talk," he said, "but I need to know. Do you want to go back?" Lena's head shot up. "No." Silas nodded once. "All right, then." He stayed there for another moment, then climbed down without another word. She sat there in the rafters a while longer, heart finally beginning to slow. Her breathing evened out. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. Later that evening, Silas cooked beans and cornbread. He didn't mention the sheriff. Lena didn't either. She sat at the table across from him, watching the way the light from the lantern caught the gray in his beard. After supper, she helped wash the dishes. She didn't speak much, but when she passed him the towel, their fingers brushed. She didn't pull away. When she went to bed, there was a small bundle wrapped in cloth on her pillow. Inside was a pencil, short and sharpened, and a tiny leather-bound notebook. Blank pages, clean and ready. She opened it slowly, then wrote just 3 words, "I feel safe." She left the notebook open on the kitchen table. The next morning, it was gone. But she found a horseshoe hanging on her door, old, bent, and rusted, with a fresh piece of string tying it to the hook. Lucky charm, maybe, or with just a cowboy's quiet way of saying, "I saw your note." Days passed. Lena began to sleep better. The nightmares came less. She helped feed the horses, sweep the porch, and collect eggs. One afternoon, while brushing the old brown mare, she asked Silas, "You ever lose someone?" Silas paused, then nodded. "Yeah." "Did it feel like part of you went with him?" He didn't answer right away, just kept brushing the horse beside her. "Sometimes," he said softly, "it felt like the part that laughed went missing." Lena looked down at the dust on her boots. "But it comes back," Silas added after a while. "Not the same way, but it does." Lena nodded. That night, she took the leather notebook back out and drew a picture. It was of the ranch, the barn, the cabin, the horses grazing in the field. She drew Silas too, with his hat low, his beard thick, and a gentle line for his eyes. At the edge of the page, she drew a little girl, standing close beside him. She titled it Home, and for the first time since Mama passed, Lena meant it. The sky had just turned golden when Lena stepped out into the field that morning. The grass was high and dry, brushing against her dress as she walked. She carried a small bucket of oats, whistling softly like Silas had taught her. The horses had started to trust her more lately. She could feel it in the way they didn't flinch when she came near, in the way they turned their heads, as if listening when she talked to them. The colt had been a wild one from the beginning. Born just after she came to the ranch, he was lean and fast and stubborn, with a streak of white down his nose and eyes full of fire. Silas called him Devil's Toe, but Lena had started calling him Lucky, quiet-like, just between them. That morning, something fell off. The horses were milling around near the fence, pacing. The old brown mare was neighing sharp and high, more urgent than usual. Lena dropped the bucket and hurried forward, heart thudding. She found him halfway tangled in the wire fence. Lucky had tried to jump it, maybe to chase the wind, maybe just to feel free, and hadn't cleared it all the way. His back leg was caught deep in the wire, twisted and bloody. He thrashed once as Lena approached, then let out a cry that made her stop cold. Oh no," she whispered. Her feet moved before her thoughts did. She ran to him, slipping on the loose dirt, then dropped to her knees beside him. His breathing was fast, and there was panic in his eyes. She didn't know what to do, but she couldn't just stand there. "It's okay, boy," she said, though her voice trembled. "It's okay. I got you." She reached for the wire, trying to bend it back, trying to pull it off his leg. It was barbed, sharp, and unforgiving, and as she pulled, it slipped and sliced clean across her palm. Lena gasped. The pain hit like fire, sudden and hot. Her hand opened on instinct, blood already welling up in the cut. The colt kicked again, narrowly missing her, and Lena scrambled back. Her vision blurred with tears. She looked at her hand, blood trailing down her wrist now, and cried out without meaning to. "Silas!" She didn't think he'd hear. The wind was blowing. The ranch was wide, but she screamed again, voice cracking, "Silas!" She pressed her hand to her chest, trying to slow the bleeding, but it hurt bad, worse than anything she'd ever felt. Her knees were trembling, her breath shaky. The colt made another noise, softer now, like he was giving up. Then she heard boots pounding the dirt. Silas appeared over the hill, fast as he could move, his face pale and drawn. He didn't shout. He didn't ask questions. He just dropped to her side and saw everything. The blood, the fence, the trembling colt, the wide panic in Lena's eyes. "Lena," he breathed out, voice hoarse. He pulled a rag from his back pocket and wrapped it around her hand quickly, gently. She whimpered when he touched her, but he didn't let go. "You're okay," he said. "You're all right now. I got you." He looked at the cut, deep but clean. He pressed the cloth tighter, then lifted her into his arms like she weighed nothing. Her blood stained his shirt. He didn't care. He carried her back toward the cabin, every step fast but careful. She buried her face against his shoulder, breathing in the smell of him. Smoke, dust, leather, something solid and strong. She didn't cry then. Not yet. She was too stunned, but her body shook in his arms. He brought her inside and sat her down at the table, grabbing the first aid box from the shelf. His hands moved quickly, cleaning, wrapping, whispering things like, "Just breathe, and it's almost done." He didn't look angry. He looked scared. The kind of scared that doesn't shout, just goes very still and quiet. When he finished, he sat across from her, elbows on the table, head down. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I didn't mean to," Lena began, her voice small. Silas looked up. His eyes were red. "I know. I just wanted to help him. I know." There was a long silence. Then Lena asked, Did you have a daughter?" Silas blinked. He looked at her hand, still wrapped in the cloth he'd tied. Then he nodded. "She'd have been about your age now," he said softly. Lena's breath hitched. She hadn't expected him to say yes. She didn't know what she'd expected. Maybe a lie, maybe silence. But not that. "What happened?" she asked. He swallowed hard. His fingers tapped against the table once. Twice. Then stopped. "She got sick," he said. "We didn't see it coming. She was strong. Just like you." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "After she passed," Silas continued, "I stopped talking. Stopped hoping. Didn't think I'd ever feel anything again." He looked at her then, and the tears were already falling down his cheeks. Lena nodded slowly. Her own grief bubbled up. Mama's smile, the soft songs at night, the way her fingers brushed Lena's hair before sleep. Gone too soon. Gone all at once. The two of them sat at that table, tears slipping quietly into the silence. Two people carrying different kinds of loss, but feeling the same heavy ache. "I miss her every day," Lena whispered. "I miss mine too," Silas said. He reached out and took her hand, the uninjured one, in his rough, calloused grip. His hand was big and warm, like a shield. And for the first time, Lena didn't pull away. She held on, tight. The frost came earlier than expected that year. Each morning, the ranch woke under a pale layer of snow, soft and powdery like flour dusted over the earth. Lena loved to watch the horses leave prints in the white, steam rising from their nostrils as they moved. She pulled her coat tighter every day, the sleeves too long and the buttons mismatched, but she didn't mind. It had once been Silas's, and it felt like armor. One morning, a rider came up the trail, a woman wrapped in a green shawl, her cheeks pink from the cold. Lena stood back as the horse stopped by the gate. Silas stepped outside, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked at the woman and smiled, but only a little. "Morning, Nora," he said. "Morning, Silas," she replied warmly. "Heard you've got company these days." He nodded once and turned toward Lena. "Come on out, kid. Say hello." Lena hesitated. Her hands were still dirty from feeding the chickens. She wiped them quickly on her dress and stepped forward. "This is Miss Nora," Silas said. "She teaches the school up the road." Nora crouched a little, her eyes kind. "Hello, Lena. I've heard you're quite the help around here." Lena smiled politely, unsure what to say. Her heart thudded. "I was wondering," Nora said, "if you might want to try coming to school." At her words, Lena's breath caught. School. Just hearing it made her stomach twist. She remembered the last place, the way the girls had whispered behind their hands, the way the boys had laughed at her dress, her silence, the way she spoke slow and soft. She'd run home after the second day and never gone back. Lena looked at the snow-covered ground and said nothing. "We're not in a rush," Silas said gently, sensing the tension. "It's just a thought." Nora gave a little nod and didn't push. "If you ever feel ready, Lena, I'd love to have you in class." After she left, Lena sat on the porch steps, staring out at the pasture. Silas came and sat beside her. You don't have to go, he said. Not unless you want to. I want to, Lena said quietly. But I'm scared. He nodded. That's all right. They laughed at me, she whispered. In the last place. Because I was quiet. Because my dress had holes. Silas leaned back on his elbows. They laughed at me too, once. She looked at him, surprised. I was new to town, he said. Didn't know anyone. Didn't say much. Folks talk when they don't understand something. Lena thought about that. She let the silence sit between them, and then she said, I don't want them to laugh again. Silas didn't say anything for a while. He just looked out over the land, the hills, the horses, the cabin they'd made a home. The next morning, she found him in the barn, working on something at the workbench. His hands moved carefully, threading old saddle leather through a thick needle. Bits of polished brass sat beside him. He didn't say what it was, just nodded at her and kept stitching. By the third day, it was finished, a satchel, brown and soft, with strong straps and smooth corners. For your books, Silas said, handing it to her, and your lunch, and maybe a pencil or two. Lena held it like a treasure. The leather smelled like rain and trail rides, and it fit her perfectly. She traced her fingers over the stitching. He had done it all by hand. She didn't say anything, but her eyes glistened. The first day of school came after a fresh snowfall. Silas saddled up his horse and lifted Lena onto the back with him. She wore her coat, a scarf, and a new satchel slung across her chest. They rode in silence at first, the world quiet around them. Trees glittered in the morning light. Smoke curled from chimneys in the far distance. When a schoolhouse came into view, a small wooden building with a slanted roof, Lena's hands tightened around the saddle horn. Silas stopped the horse a little ways off. He turned slightly and said, I'll wait here till you go in. She nodded. And if you need me, he added, you just come back. No one's making you stay. Lena slid down from the horse slowly. Her boots crunched in the snow. She looked up at the building, heart pounding. Kids were already inside, their voices muffled by the walls. She could hear laughter, a chair scraping. She took a deep breath and walked forward. Inside, the warmth hit her like a blanket. A wood stove burned near the back. Desks lined the room in crooked rows. Nora stood at the front, writing on the board. When she saw Lena, she smiled. Welcome, Lena, she said. A few children turned to look. Some whispered. One boy nudged the girl beside him. Lena's ears turned hot. She found an empty seat near the window and sat down quickly. She kept her eyes on her desk, her hands folded tight. But as the morning passed, something started to feel okay. Nora didn't rush her. She didn't call on her suddenly or make her read aloud. She just welcomed her gently, like a breeze coming through the door. At recess, a girl named Betsy offered her half an apple. Your satchel's nice, she said. My pa makes boots, but not that good. Lena smiled, and something in her heart loosened. By the time the day ended, she wasn't scared anymore, just tired. Her satchel was full now. A book, some papers, a pencil, and a folded note from Nora that read, You're braver than you think. Silas was still waiting by the trail when she stepped out. How was it, he asked. Lena walked up to him and looked at the snow falling around them, soft and quiet. She didn't speak right away. Then she said, I think Mama would like it here. Silas didn't answer. He just nodded once, strong and full of meaning. Then he reached out his hand. She took it. Snow pressed softly against the windows that morning as Lena swept the cabin floor. Silas was out feeding the horses, and the house felt still. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, warming the wooden walls. She moved the broom under the rocking chair, then toward the corner shelf. That's when she saw it. A small tin box sat tucked behind an old stack of books. She hadn't noticed it before. Curious, she set the broom aside and gently pulled it out. The metal was cool to the touch, and the lid creaked as she opened it. Inside were a few folded papers, yellowed with time. One caught her eye right away. It was a letter. The handwriting was messy, but careful. Her name wasn't on it, but she read it anyway. I don't know if this matters now. but I still talk to you every night. I still wonder what kind of woman you'd have been. You be older now, maybe with a child of your own. I miss you every day, kid. I miss you something awful. There was no address, just a name at the top, Clara. Lena stared at the letter for a long time. Her chest felt tight, like it was holding something too big to name. When Silas came back in, brushing snow from his shoulders, she stood up slowly. I found a letter, she said softly. To your daughter. He stopped. His face didn't change right away, but his eyes grew distant. I didn't mean to snoop, she added quickly. It was behind the shelf. Silas nodded slowly and took off his hat. I never sent it. Just wrote it one night when it was raining. I was missing her bad. Can we go? Lena asked. To see her. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he gave a single quiet nod. They rode out that afternoon. The sky was clear and the snow glittered under the sun. They didn't talk much as they rode. Just the sound of hooves in snow and the soft rustle of wind through bare branches. The grave was on a hill just past the ridge, a simple stone with a name and 2 dates now worn with time. A small wooden cross stood beside it, leaning slightly. Silas dismounted first. He stood in silence, removing his hat and holding it over his chest. Lena got down and reached in her coat. She pulled out a single white flower she had picked from near the house. It was a little frostbitten, but still whole. She walked to the grave and knelt. I think she'd be happy I'm here now, she said quietly. With you. Silas closed his eyes. A tear slipped down, catching in the scruff of his beard. They didn't say much else, but something heavy lifted that day, like a door opened in both their hearts, letting the light back in. Winter deepened, but the ranch grew warmer. There was laughter in the kitchen now, light from the windows spilling onto the snow outside. Lena learned to bake biscuits. Silas told her stories over supper, stories about horses, about trails long gone, about the way her laugh reminded him of someone he used to know. Nights were quiet and safe. No more sleeping in barns. No more running. One evening, the wind howled outside, but the fire glowed strong. Lena was already in bed, the blanket tucked up to her chin. Silas came in quietly, a book in his hand, and sat beside her. You need anything? He asked. She shook her head. He leaned down and pulled the blanket snug around her shoulders. As he stood to leave, she reached out and grabbed his hand. You're not just cowboy uncle now, she said, her voice small and certain. You're just my home. Silas froze. Then he sat back down, his eyes wet, though he didn't try to hide it. He brushed her hair gently from her face, his voice thick. In your mind, little one, he whispered.